Hello again. You are listening to Is This Strange? Stories of the Unusual by KL and Roxy. So today we want to talk about a house that we found before we settled on the place in Pennsylvania. This house is what horror movies would come from. There's like a level to hauntings that I would live in, and that house was definitely not it. That was like creepy haunting. And I'll let Roxy tell most of it, but the reason it was creepy is because of what was going on then.
Right.
With the living people that were living in there versus past history, like over hundreds of years of a building being historical. This was because of people that were actually living in the house.
Right. So some hauntings are from accidents, war,
just residuals of history.
And it's usually something emotional or physical. It can be related to pain. It can be related to suffering, anger, violence. And this house,
and we need to give a warning, this one is going to be a little bit darker.
This is dark, and it is creepy.
Because the house was also dark and creepy.
The house was very dark and creepy. So if any of y'all know anything about us two, we love old houses, log cabins, places with history, things like that. And when we were looking for a place, a house came up on, I think it was 10 acres, and it had a river. And it was really pretty. It was beautiful. It would have honestly been perfect. Yeah, it even had a barn already that we could have used for the horses. Right.
And, reasonable acreage.
And of course, Roxy loved it because it was a gigantic old, Amish style barn that was 3 stories tall. It was falling apart, but it was fixable, but it was completely full of antique junk. Like 100 by 300 foot size barn. It was huge.
I know, and they said everything came with it, and they expected most people would have to just bulldoze it or burn it or something to get rid of all the stuff, and you're like, oh, you don't know us.
And it had little houses and sheds on the entry, and when we first drove in,
it was very charming.
We were like, oh, this would be nice, and the land is laid out nicely. And then we rolled up to the house, which was this old, dark, huge, large log cabin type place. It was.
It would have been nice.
It would have been nice,
except there was a dark. I think the only way you could describe it would be is that there was a dark aura surrounding it.
Yeah, it immediately descended on you
like a dark bubble.
Yeah, it was horrible. So, but we went in and looked just in case.
And we need to say one thing. I can't shield.
Yeah.
I cannot shield for crap. I should be able to, but I can't. So I have to have Roxy because she can shield for both of us.
Right. And the first thing they should have told us, because they said it's got an old cesspool and it would have to be updated. And the cesspool was literally a dangerous wet bog.
I know, this wasn't like the cesspool. There's a lot of houses in Pennsylvania that have cesspools.
But they're capped.
They're capped. Like the one that we were at, the house that we eventually settled on, it had a capped cesspool, and it was on a hill, and it was completely clean. And
think of a well that you put stuff in instead of take stuff out. That's basically what the old cesspools were.
This wasn't even capped, and it was leaking, and it stunk.
And that was odd because we were like, what? You know what you would have to do to make a cesspool overfill like that? It was horrible. So it was a weird setup. You went down some stairs into a basement, and it had a cook stove and a lot of home jars, and tons of food. And we're like, there is a lot of food in here. But this was not updated at all. And it was very spiderwebbery and very dark basement and very low. Even for me at my height, it felt very compressed.
I don't think it was low. I actually think that was the way the house felt.
It felt like it was squatting on you. It was horrible. Then we went to the main floor, and it had another huge, beautiful, and the stove was beautiful.
Oh yeah.
The stove was absolutely beautiful, and I would have loved that. But all of the logs were dark, like somebody had painted them black at one point.
It was odd, because I'm not sure if that was true.
I don't know, but it was very oppressive. But it was like, well, we could lighten this up, a good coat of paint or whatever.
Still didn't know. We were still down on the bottom floor.
Then they take us up to the next floor, And it was a very small floor. One room we were not allowed into. I think it was actually
I think it
the
was the
owner's master bedroom, the people that live there. And there was one bathroom, and it was in horrible shape.
And leaking.
And it leaked. The toilet leaked. Everything leaked. One bathroom. So we're talking, this is the first bathroom that we saw.
Yeah.
Whether there was one in the master, I don't know, because we weren't allowed in there. Okay, and it took up most of that floor. And then there was one small room to the side.
That makes me worry about we weren't allowed in there. Because
I know.
When we were selling our place, we had to allow them everywhere.
And then there was one other small bedroom. And we went in there, and it looked like it used to be a closet, and there was 2 sets of bunk beds.
Yeah.
For like little kids. And the bad part about it, and this is where it started to freak us out, was that there was a padlock on the outside of the door. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, okay, and we were like, oh, is there more? Because we found a small set of stairs. It was an attic, and in the old houses.
And when you say attic, I mean it was an attic,
like up under the roof eaves.
Yeah, and you would come down to part of it, and it would only be like maybe 3 feet tall
on the thing. So we go up there, and it's completely open but split in half. One half was closed off to one side, and one half was closed. And I'm assuming this was a separation of boys and girls.
But again, didn't know this at the time. We're like, what the hell is going on? There's mattresses on the floor. There's mattresses on on bed frames. Yeah. And I started seeing writings
in the wall
on the ceiling, because the ceiling was pretty low.
Yeah.
And there was some that said, "Help me."
Yep.
And I'm like, what the hell? And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, they're foster parents." And I'm like, they're foster parents, but they're locking kids in.
Yeah.
They're not locking them out. They're locking them in.
And now all of the massive, cheap, generic food boxes.
Yeah.
And the overflowing cesspool and one bathroom and 4 bunk beds for the smaller children. And then upstairs, that upstairs was so oppressive. It was like walking into a camp after you've rescued the people from being, held hostage. And we're not kidding. There was so much writing. There was people writing really bad poetry, but it was basically teenage poetry. This was basically like, help me. This is hell. I can't stand this. Why did, this happen to me? It was absolutely oppressive. And I think we saw at least 8 mattresses on the floor, because like we said, the sides of the walls, because this was literally in an attic, was only a couple feet tall, and I could touch the roof. It was...
So, you get the point. This was a very dark place with a lot of dark energy.
Yeah.
So that started to bring up, because we were talking about it, and we start remembering, we walked into the other house that was very obviously haunted. And it was bright, and it was airy, and it felt like it was hugging you.
Yeah.
This place felt like it was repelling you.
Yeah.
Like you didn't want to go in there.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we never moved there. We never bought it. I actually recommended that he needed to call social services.
Serious.
And we're not downing foster systems. We understand that there's some people that go into it wholeheartedly, and they just want to help. But there's other people... And I'm going to say it was probably these people that were hoarding foster kids.
Yeah. And I honestly wonder now that it's done and we assume there was no one there, because it had little houses on, also other little buildings on there.
That we weren't allowed to go to.
And what I'm worried about now is that they didn't take these kids and take them somewhere, that they were locked in a room somewhere and said, don't make a sound while they're, and that's why we weren't allowed in certain areas of the house. But, in the foster system, we all know needs to be repaired. And we hear horror stories, but this was a living horror story. You could literally just take this story, run with it. Mm-hmm. And you're like, this place is not safe. This cesspool, someone could just go and disappear, and you'd never know they were in there. I know,
yeah.
And they're like, they'll have to dredge it out and put it in a septic.
And they were like, and we would have to do all this stuff to qualify for a loan. And it's like, why don't they have to do this stuff to qualify to live here with a bunch of foster kids?
It was absolutely horrible conditions, and I give kudos to the people that really love to do fostering, and they really want to help kids. But for too many kids out there, it is this.
Uh-huh.
And I worry about what they've done to these kids. I mean,
And it got imprinted into the walls.
it did get imprinted into the walls and the floor and everything else. But
All right,
anyways,
so that
creepy.
is our story of another creepy house. Our house was not creepy, but this is a story of a creepy house we came across in Pennsylvania that we didn't find out the history until we were already walking through it.
So opinions.
Is this strange?
Is that strange? Should they tear this place down and spread
the ashes into the wind?
Seriously, holy water somewhere. So that's our thing. And yes,
Is this strange?
is this strange?
You tell us.
Yep.
Bye.